Hello, you're listening to Metal Verbalizers, and I am Johan, and today I will verbalize Hazzerd. Hazzerd is a 4-piece thrash metal band from Calgary in Canada. I was founded in, I believe it was 2013. Hazzerd might be seen as a somewhat known name to some within underground thrash metal, and not the least the kind of new wave of thrash metal type music, but I'm personally a big fan of this band, and I feel that even though they might be somewhat recognized to some people, I personally feel that they deserve to be much more recognized and could be much more recognized. And thus I think that they absolutely should be included on the Metal Verbalizers podcast. But anyway, so to kind of begin explaining the band a little bit, is that the vocalist and drummer of Hazzerd, Dylan, wanted to start this band after kind of falling out with his previous band that he played in before, Hazzerd. And I suppose I could kind of like add that a little bit, which I talked about earlier when I was verbalizing Isle Ruin on this podcast. Is the kind of thing where the singer also plays the drums, which I think is absolutely incredible, and almost, you know, it kind of makes you feel that it's almost hard to realize how they can be so skilled to both sing and play drums. And not the least, if you listen to bands like Hazzerd, which I of course encourage you to do after hearing this episode if you haven't heard them before. And I mean, if you have heard them, you know that they're great. But anyway, if you've heard Hazzerd, like the kind of speed and the stuff they're playing, to play that on drums as well as singing the lyrics and singing that kind of style, it's almost, you know, hard to believe how someone can do that, you know, both of those things. Like both of them on their own is very, very great and impressing, but to do them both, you know, the vocals and the drums is you know, it's on a complete other level, you know. So I kind of wanted to mention that again. It's like absolutely incredible. I think it seems that the overall drive that kind of like inspired Dylan and what kind of made Hazzerd become a band was the kind of you know, they kind of eat, breathe, and sleep thrash metal. You know, like the really, really early bands did. You know, like Metallica and Megadeth and bands like that. You know, in the really, really early days, when it was like completely die hard thrash metal, 100%. And I believe that I think Hazzerd and the members kind of had that similar, you know, die-hard mindset when it comes to thrash. And then when Dylan met Brendan, that also had the kind of same type of beer and metal die-hard attitude, they eventually ended up forming what is now known as Hazzerd. The band has compared their overall sound and approach to kind of a 80s thrash style in the vein of bands such as Heathen, Testament, Mortal Sin, and the big four bands to some degree, of course. But they also have mentioned that their influences range from everything from Overkill, Vicious Rumors, and Tyrannics to bands like Queen, Boston, and The Doors. And something that becomes very like prominent and clear when kind of like mentioning the influences Dylan mentioned to me, is that they certainly have a lot of influences outside of thrash, outside of metal, and especially outside, like, you know, extreme type of metal. I mean, Iron Maiden, of course, is another influence that Dylan mentioned. That's what I've kind of been into a little bit earlier in other episodes and such, is that I think it's a really cool part. It's like a really cool thing, and part of what kind of gives a somewhat not sure if original is the correct word here, but it's kind of like, you know, making it kind of unique, interesting is perhaps better word, I think. It's like it creates an interesting sound when, like, if you want to make thrash metal, you can't just listen to thrash and only take inspiration from thrash. But when you take like influences and stuff from other genres as well and kind of like mix those together and kind of see what happens, I think that's when really, like, you know, creativity and really interesting and in some ways maybe even original and unique sounds really, you know, is formed. And basically what Hazzerd believed that you can kind of like expect when you listen to them is pretty much heavy, loud, fast and aggressive thrash metal. And even if that might not be like 100% of the time, Hazzerd would not consider themselves as a very easy listening. But I mean, I as I mentioned earlier, I'm personally a big fan of this band, and everything from their EP in 2014, Victimize the Innocent, or like the debut full length in 2017, which was Misleading Evil, or like their other full length in 2020, Delirium. It's all great thrash metal. And I guess we could take a little time here to mention their album art on their first EP and their 2 full-length albums. And I suppose we could start with kind of like Victimize the Innocent, that has a very horror style album art with a man sitting in a chair and a some kind of I suppose you could call it a kind of like a zombie style man holding a knife, and the guy screaming like he's about to stab him. It's like really a horror style thing, which I think works really good for not only death metal, but I think that horror style and horror vibe can work really well for a thrash metal band as well. That Hazzerd obviously is. So it definitely, I think that's the kind of cover art that really kind of gets your attention, with especially if you're like into horror and that kind of style. And it's like at some point, like when you see some violent album art or like really horror style with like a zombie or like a knife and stuff like that, it's like that stuff is not going to be something like power metal or like, you know, something of the more, you know, symphonic or something really melodic like that. That's going to be some fast, heavy stuff, you know. So I really like that kind of like horror style for genres such as thrash and death metal, because it really kind of shows you that that is some serious stuff. And I suppose Victimize the Innocent is an example of kind of what I mean here, with the kind of like horror art that can really like kind of give you a really hint on what kind of to expect. Kind of going over to Misleading Evil, it's definitely not as like horror style, but they kind of have the same style as the man with the knife from Victimize the Innocent. But it has a really like two-face thing going on here that I really like. It's like having on one side of the suit is like purple and the other side is red, and the background behind him kind of following a similar type of thing here. Like on one side it's a blue sky with little clouds, and it's green, and there's a river going there, and it looks overall nice. But like on the other side it's really cloudy, it's dark, it looks almost evil. It's like a big power plant where you see like dark smoke and stuff. It's like really like nice and like dark and almost evil in a way. And I really like that kind of like idea behind the album art. And I think it's kind of like the same thing with Misleading Evil in that sense. It's like it definitely caught my attention. It's like it looks interesting. And with Hazzerd having the name they have, and the logo and the kind of like name Misleading Evil, me as a big thrash metal fan, which I think is pretty clear, maybe based on the bands that I've talked about on this podcast so far, which has mostly been thrash metal. But as a big thrash metal fan, to kind of get to the point, this album art is definitely like really getting my attention, and the music of course made me stay. And kind of going over to the last album, Delirium, it kind of has a very like you have the same man once again standing like in the middle, and then you see like a really like torn city in the background, and I believe I see some like police with the riot gear, and you see someone like holding their phone, and maybe if I see correctly, I can see like someone sitting down with what looks like a straight jacket and stuff like that, which I think like I'm not entirely certain exactly what Hazzerd had in mind, but I think that the kind of like straight jacket and the riot police and like the man holding his phone really like ties together really well with the album name or album title, Delirium, which, because I mean as people have kind of talked about before, is that it is a lot of these kind of things like you know, social media and whatnot is kind of considered somewhat of a delirium sometimes. And also that's also something that I could kind of like add here that I believe I mentioned before, that something that I'm a big fan of is when bands kind of have a really first of all, as I said before, it's like should obviously be like it's supposed to caught your attention, of course, but it should also like the album art should really like directly tie together with the album title, and if the album cover and the album title as well as the band name has like connections between each other, and also being really interesting and being able to catch your attention, that's like the ultimate album cover in my opinion, or like the ultimate, you know, package in a way, if you kind of get my point. I think Delirium definitely made me like think about something a little bit in the style of you know, Hell on Earth by Toxic Holocaust, but there are some clear differences, of course, in the color scheme. While Hell on Earth being more of a purple yellow style thing and more of a post-apocalyptic look on the background, Hazzerd has a more blue and green color scheme here, with a, maybe I wouldn't say that the city looks kind of like post-apocalyptic, but it looks more like war-torn, if you get my meaning. It's like with the riot police, it kind of looks like a riot and stuff like that. But anyway, if we're gonna talk a little bit more about the album in the sense of music, I would personally consider Misleading Evil and Delirium as excellent thrash metal records, and I would personally also say that those are pretty much essential albums to anybody who likes thrash metal, and not the least the new wave kind of thrash metal style. It's like if you're into new wave thrash metal and haven't heard an album like Misleading Evil, I would absolutely say, well, you should absolutely do it right now, because if you like thrash metal and especially new wave, you will love that album. And I would of course say the same about Delirium as well. Those are two albums that I have a really hard time, like, you know, deciding which one I like best, because they are both absolutely great thrash overall. And with that being said, I believe it's time to wrap things up now. I appreciate you listening, and if you like this episode, make sure to follow Metal Verbalizers, and we will give you more tips like this one. And if this episode results in you checking this band out, then please tag us and let them know that we send you to them. We would absolutely appreciate it a lot, and we will be back to you soon with another verbalization.